In a city nursing home, a 12-year-old black boy brings a sandwich every day to a lonely elderly woman. Over time, the two become close friends, keeping that quiet routine. Until one day he walks in with the sandwich and she's gone. Before he can even process what's happening, sharp heels echo down the hallway, followed by a formal-looking entourage. And then, the woman leading them looks straight at him and says something that leaves him frozen. What's going on? Before we dive deeper into this story, let us know where you're watching from and don't forget to hype and subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. Marcus Carter gripped the paper bag tighter, but the woman he'd been bringing it to had disappeared. The scent of pine cleaner and floor polish saturated the air, a smell as familiar to Marcus as his own bedroom, as the scent of his father's aftershave, as the smell of home. But today something felt profoundly wrong. The air itself seemed different, heavier somehow, charged with an absence that Marcus could feel in his bones. He stood in the doorway of room 318. The bed was stripped bare. It wasn't just empty, it was erased. The cream-colored blanket that Mrs. Dorothy always kicked off her feet was gone. The sheets, the ones she complained were too scratchy, were gone. The overstuffed pillow that she said was too soft, that gave her a crick in her neck, had vanished. Only a pale plastic mattress remained, looking naked and abandoned, like something exposed that should have been covered. "Mrs. Dorothy," he whispered into the empty space. No answer came. The rasping cough she always made when he first appeared, that distinctive sound that was half greeting half complaint, was absent. The room sat in terrible silence, the kind of silence that feels like it has weight, like it's pressing down on you. Marcus's stomach did a strange flip. He stepped inside, his worn sneakers squeaking against the linoleum in a way that seemed too loud, too intrusive. The turkey sandwich in the bag suddenly felt impossibly heavy, like it weighed 10 pounds instead of a few ounces. "Marcus, what are you doing in there?" Marcus jumped, his heart leaping into his throat. His father, James Carter, stood at the door. He wore his gray janitor's uniform, the one with Meadowbrook Senior Living embroidered on the chest pocket. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle from years of physical labor, and his face showed the familiar lines of exhaustion etched by years of double shifts and worry. He was holding a mop and bucket, and he did not look pleased. "I told you not to bother the residents," James said, though his voice carried more weariness than anger. There was a defeated quality to it, the sound of a man who'd given the same warning 100 times and knew it wouldn't stick. "This room is on my list to be cleaned." "That means the patient." "Well, it means we need to get moving." "But where did she go?" Marcus asked, his voice barely audible, almost swallowed by the emptiness of the room. Did she go home?" James's expression softened. He set the bucket down on the floor with a dull thud, water sloshing slightly. He knew how much Marcus had liked the difficult woman in 318. He'd seen his son's face light up when he talked about their conversations, even though Marcus wasn't supposed to be visiting patients at all. "Son, I don't think she went home. Mrs. Castellano was very old. She was very sick." Sometimes he didn't finish. He didn't need to. A new sound echoed from the end of the long corridor. It was a sharp, purposeful sound that cut through the institutional quiet. Not the soft shuffle of nurses in their comfortable shoes or the squeak of medication carts with their loose wheels. It was the sound of expensive heels on tile, multiple pairs, moving with precision and authority. James pulled Marcus back into the doorway, his hand protectively on his son's shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. Mr. Whitmore, the nursing home administrator, appeared first. He was a thin man in his 50s who usually looked harried, always rushing from one crisis to another, always juggling too many responsibilities with too few resources. Today he looked genuinely frightened. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He was practically walking backward, wringing his hands like he was trying to wash them without water. Behind him, 5 people entered the hallway. They moved with synchronized precision, like a military unit. The woman in the lead was tall and elegant, perhaps 60 years old, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. She wore a charcoal blazer with the congressional seal pinned to the lapel, a small golden pin that caught the fluorescent light. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, not a strand out of place, and her dark eyes missed nothing as they swept the corridor, taking in every detail, every person, every reaction. Behind her, 4 aides followed in lockstep. They all wore expensive suits, charcoal and navy blue, perfectly tailored, the kind that probably cost more than James made in a month. They made the beige walls of Meadowbrook Senior Living look shabby and worn. The nursing home fell silent. A nurse pushing a medication cart froze mid-step, her hand still on the handle, her mouth slightly open. An orderly stopped mopping, water dripping from the mop head onto the floor. Even the usual background noise, the distant television sets playing game shows, the murmur of voices from other rooms, the hum of the heating system, seemed to fade away, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The group stopped directly in front of room 318. The tall woman, the senator, looked at Mr. Whitmore with the kind of gaze that could pin a person in place. Her voice was clear and commanding, filling the entire corridor. "You are the administrator." "Yes, Senator Harrison, ma'am," Mr. Whitmore stammered, his words tumbling over each other. We're so honored. We weren't expecting, we had no notice that you would be." "I am not here for honors," the senator said, cutting him off with the efficiency of someone used to controlling conversations. Her gaze swept the area. She saw James in his uniform, saw the mop and bucket, saw the institutional gray of his work clothes. And she saw Marcus hiding behind him, a small boy with messy black hair and wide, uncertain eyes. "I am here for Mrs. Dorothy Castellano." "Mrs. Castellano passed away this morning, ma'am." Peacefully, Mr. Whitmore said quickly. "At 6:47 a.m. We've begun the arrangements." "I see," Senator Harrison said, her jaw tightening for a single second. She gave a short, sharp nod. "Then I am here to execute her final instructions." "I was her attorney." "Her executor." She looked past the administrator. Her eyes landed on Marcus, and there was something in that gaze, recognition perhaps, or curiosity. James felt his son's hand grip his uniform tighter, the small fingers clutching the fabric. He tried to pull Marcus behind him, to shield him from this intimidating woman and whatever this visit meant, but the senator had already seen him. "I was told she had a visitor," Senator Harrison said. Her voice softer now but no less commanding. "A young boy, one who brought her sandwiches." Mr. Whitmore looked confused, his eyebrows knitting together. "Ma'am, I have no record of, he's just the janitor's son. He's not supposed to be visiting patients. It's against our policy." "Is this him?" the senator demanded, and her voice was not cruel but it was absolute. She stepped forward, her heels clicking on the linoleum, and James Carter, a man who cleaned floors for a living, who had spent his entire adult life trying to be invisible, found himself standing face to face with a United States senator. Her sharp dark eyes looked down at his 12-year-old son with his messy black hair and uncertain expression, his hand clutching a paper bag. "Young man," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle now, but still carrying the weight of authority. "Are you the boy who visited Dorothy Castellano?" Marcus swallowed hard, his throat felt dry. He looked up at his father, who gave him a small nod. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said quietly. "I brought her sandwiches." Senator Harrison's face softened, just for a moment. Something that might have been sadness or relief or both flickered across her features. "Then you need to come with me," she said. "Both of you. We have matters to discuss." 3 months earlier, Meadowbrook Senior Living was Marcus's after-school prison, and he'd come to know every inch of it. It wasn't a terrible place. It wasn't one of those gleaming facilities from commercials with manicured lawns and smiling staff in crisp white uniforms. It was an old converted hotel from the 1960s that smelled of disinfectant, overcooked vegetables, and something vaguely medicinal that Marcus could never quite identify. It was a place of quiet, of long hallways with fluorescent lights that hummed constantly, creating a white noise that became so familiar you stopped noticing it. It was a place of people who looked like faded photographs, their features still visible but somehow less vivid than they must have once been. The building was 3 stories tall, shaped like an L, with the long wing containing resident rooms, and the short wing housing administration offices, the kitchen, and common areas. The walls were beige, that particular shade of institutional beige that seemed designed to be as inoffensive and unmemorable as possible. For the past 2 years, ever since his mother had passed from cancer, a quick, brutal illness that had taken her from diagnosis to death in less than 6 months, James Carter had worked double shifts. He cleaned floors at Meadowbrook from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Then Marcus would take the bus from school and meet him. From 2:15 until 5 o'clock, Marcus would do his homework in the third-floor supply closet while his father finished the evening cleaning rounds. The closet was his refuge. It was cramped, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, smelled of paper towels and ammonia, but it was his. He sat on an overturned bucket, using a stack of folded towels as a desk. The light was a single bare bulb that cast harsh shadows, but it was enough to read by. His father was a good man and a hard worker. Everyone said so. James believed in rules. Rules kept you safe, rules kept you employed, rules kept food on the table and a roof over your head. Marcus had 3 rules, drilled into him until they were automatic: be invisible. We're lucky, Mr. Whitmore lets you stay here after school. Don't make him regret it. Do not touch anything. We can't afford to replace anything if you break it. Do not under any circumstances bother the residents. They're here for peace and quiet, not to be disturbed by a child. Marcus was good at following rules. He was a quiet boy with thick black hair that always needed cutting. He had watchful eyes, dark brown, almost black, that took in everything. He observed the world like a scientist observing an experiment. He saw Mrs. Patterson, the head nurse, who always seemed stressed. Mrs. Patterson was in her 50s, heavy-set, with iron gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had a permanent furrow in her brow and was constantly scolding someone. This is a care facility, not a playground. She'd snap if she saw Marcus in the hallway. Children don't belong here. Then there was Eugene, the orderly. Eugene was a large, kind man in his 60s with dark skin and a deep voice who hummed old gospel songs while he worked. He would often accidentally leave a granola bar or an orange near the supply closet door around 3:30. "Floor's dirty, better get that before I clean it up," he'd mutter, never looking at Marcus directly. Marcus's life was about being quiet, about not being a problem, about making himself as small and unobtrusive as possible. His father worked so hard. James's hands were rough and red from the cleaning chemicals, the skin cracked and dry despite the lotion he applied every night. At night Marcus would watch his father fall asleep in his armchair, too tired to even make it to his bed. Marcus knew his father worried about money. The whispered phone calls late at night were always about bills, the rent, the car payment on the old Honda Civic, the past due notices that came in envelopes with red lettering. Marcus's family had a history of being strong. In their small apartment, a one-bedroom where Marcus slept on the couch and his father took the bedroom, there was one photograph that was always kept dust-free. It showed a young woman in a Navy uniform from decades ago, standing on the deck of a ship with the ocean behind her. That was Marcus's grandmother, Lieutenant Sarah Carter. She'd served on a destroyer in the Pacific during the late 1960s and early 1970s. His father had told him the story many times. "Your grandmother was a hero. A real hero, not the kind they make movies about, but the real kind. She saved 3 sailors during a fire in the engine room. The alarm went off, everyone was evacuating, following protocol. But she heard someone calling for help. She went in when everyone else was running out, found 3 men trapped by the flames, led them out through the smoke. She got a medal for it, but she never talked about it much. Said she was just doing her job. That's what real heroes do. They don't brag about it." Marcus loved that photograph. She looked strong, she looked like she knew who she was and what she stood for. But heroes didn't pay the bills. Heroes didn't keep the lights on or put food in the refrigerator. One Wednesday afternoon in late October, the supply closet was unbearable. A shipment of industrial cleaner had arrived that morning, the strong kind, with warnings about ventilation on the label, and the fumes burned Marcus's eyes and made his throat feel raw. He peeked his head out into the corridor, checking carefully. Mrs. Patterson was at the far end of the hall, her back to him as she reviewed a chart with another nurse. Eugene was nowhere to be seen. Marcus slipped out just to breathe fresh air. He walked down the hall, trying to be invisible, practicing the technique his father had taught him. Walk close to the wall. Don't make eye contact. Move with purpose but not urgency. He passed room 312, Mr. Kowalski, a man who always watched cooking shows with the volume turned up too loud. No, 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 too much salt. He passed room 316, Mrs. Yamamoto, a woman who did crossword puzzles all day and never spoke. And then he came to room 318. He'd passed it before, many times, but the door was always closed. Today it was open just a crack, and he heard a sound. A low, angry voice. "This is garbage," a voice barked. A woman's voice, rough with age but strong. "Absolute garbage. Take it away." A young nurse's aide backed out of the room holding a tray, her face bright red. Her hands were shaking slightly. She didn't like the meatloaf. The aide whispered to another nurse. "Nobody likes the meatloaf," the other nurse replied with a weary sigh. "But Mrs. Castellano doesn't have to be so nasty about it." Marcus looked at the tray. The brown lump of meatloaf was untouched, congealing in its own grease. So were the green beans and the mashed potatoes. Everything was untouched. He peeked through the crack in the door. Inside, an old woman sat in a wheelchair by the window. She was thin, frighteningly thin. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was a map of deep wrinkles. Her eyes were a fierce, penetrating brown. She looked like an angry hawk. She turned her head and saw him. Their eyes met. Marcus froze. "What do you want?" she snapped. Her voice was like gravel scraping concrete. "Who are you?" Marcus's mind went blank. All his father's rules flew out the window. I heard, "This isn't a zoo," she growled. "Get out. Don't need kids gawking at me. Go on. Scram." Marcus scrammed. He ran back to the supply closet, his heart hammering. The woman had been so angry, but also so thin, and the food had been untouched. That night, after they ate dinner, ramen noodles with a scrambled egg mixed in, Marcus told his father what happened. "That's Mrs. Castellano." James sighed, rubbing his temples. "The nurses call her Dorothy the Destroyer. She's our most difficult resident. She yells at everyone. I heard she made 2 aides quit last month." He looked at Marcus seriously. "Don't go near that room again, Marcus. I mean it. I can't afford to have complaints. If she complains about you, I could lose this job. And we need this job. Do you understand?" "I understand," Marcus said, but he couldn't forget. The tray, the untouched food. The next day he took the bus to the nursing home like always. In his backpack, he had his social studies book, his math homework, and a small paper bag. Inside the bag was half of a turkey sandwich from his own lunch. He went to his closet. He waited, watching the clock on his phone. At 2:30 he knew Mrs. Patterson was on her break. He slipped out of the closet. He walked down the hall. His legs felt like jelly. His heart was pounding. He stopped at room 308. The door was open a crack. He listened. He heard the low murmur of a television. He pushed the door open just an inch more. Mrs. Dorothy was in her wheelchair, facing the window. Her back was to him. She seemed to be dozing. He tiptoed in. The room smelled like old magazines and mentholated ointment. He held his breath, moving as quietly as he could. He reached the small table beside her chair. It was covered in pill bottles and tissues. He quietly, placed the half sandwich, still wrapped in wax paper, on a clean napkin. And he ran. He made it back to the supply closet, his heart pounding. He felt like a bank robber. He waited all afternoon, expecting his father to show up any minute. He expected Mrs. Patterson to call security. Nothing happened. The next day he was consumed by curiosity. He waited until 2:30. He went back to room 318. He peeked in. The sandwich was gone. The wax paper was still there, neatly folded, but the sandwich was gone. A small thrill went through him. He crept into the room. Mrs. Dorothy was in her bed this time, propped up on pillows, her eyes closed. He pulled the second half of his sandwich from his bag. He placed it on the napkin. As he turned to leave, her eyes snapped open. "You're the sandwich ghost," she grumbled. Marcus froze. I'm sorry, ma'am. I just thought, I saw that you didn't eat." She stared at him. Her brown eyes were piercing. "Turkey." There was a long pause. "My wife liked turkey." Another pause. "I'm a roast beef person myself." "Oh," Marcus said, his heart sinking. "I'm sorry, I only have turkey. That's what my dad always makes." She reached a shaky, spotted hand toward the table. Her fingers were swollen at the knuckles, twisted and painful looking. She fumbled with the wax paper, her fingers seeming stiff and clumsy. She finally unwrapped it and took a bite, chewing slowly. Marcus stood by the door, unsure if he should run or stay. It's dry, she said finally. My dad says you're not supposed to add too much mayo, Marcus offered. But I think a little extra helps. Mayo is for amateurs, she muttered. But she took another bite, and then another. She ate the entire half sandwich. Well, she said, brushing crumbs from her thin cardigan. Don't just stand there with the door open. You're letting a draft in. It was a dismissal, but it wasn't scram. It wasn't angry. Marcus nodded. Yes ma'am, I'll go. I'll come back tomorrow. If that's okay, whatever, she said, turning to look out the window. Marcus left, closing the door gently behind him. It became their secret ritual. Every day at 2:30, when Mrs. Patterson was on her break and Eugene was downstairs, Marcus would bring her half of his sandwich. Sometimes it was turkey. Sometimes, if his father had a little extra money that week, it was ham from the deli counter. Once it was chicken salad, which she said was acceptable but too much celery. She never ever said thank you. Instead she would complain. This one's too salty. This bread is stale. Do you know how much sodium is in this? It's poison. But she always ate it, every bite. Sometimes she could manage it herself. Sometimes when her hands were particularly bad, swollen and red, and clearly painful, Marcus would hold it for her, and she would take small bites, never acknowledging what was happening, just eating in silence. She started talking to him, not about herself, not about her past. She would ask him about school. What are they teaching you now? You learning fractions? Yes ma'am, we're doing fractions and decimals. Waste of time, complete waste. No one uses fractions in real life. You got a calculator on that phone of yours? Yes ma'am, there you go, waste of time. What about that Mrs. Patterson? She'd ask. She's a tyrant, isn't she? She's just very strict, Marcus would say. She's wound too tight, needs a vacation. Marcus learned things about her in little pieces. She hated the color beige, the color of giving up, she called it. She liked baseball, but only the games from the 1970s. She'd been in the Navy. Marcus learned this when he saw a faded photograph on her bedside table. And she hated being called Dorothy. Name's Dorothy, she told him once. Only doctors and bill collectors call me Mrs. Castellano. You can call me Dorothy, but if you call me Dottie, I'll throw this water glass at you. Marcus had laughed, thinking she was joking, but the look on her face suggested she wasn't entirely kidding. The weeks passed. October turned to November. Marcus came every day at 2:30. Dorothy ate every sandwich. They talked about nothing important, school, television shows, the weather. And then one day, Mrs. Patterson almost caught them. Marcus was just handing Dorothy the sandwich when the nurse's shadow fell across the doorway. Mr. Carter, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice sharp. Marcus froze. Dorothy's hand, which had been reaching for the sandwich, snapped back to her lap. Your father is looking for you. You are not to be in this room. Residents are not a sideshow. Mrs. Castellano needs her rest. She's fine, Dorothy growled. She's not hurting anyone. Hospital policy, Mrs. Castellano, Mrs. Patterson said. No unsupervised children. Now Marcus, go. Marcus looked at Dorothy. She looked at him for a long moment, then looked away out the window. She looked small suddenly, vulnerable, alone. Marcus ran out, his face burning with shame. His father was waiting in the hallway, his face a mixture of anger. Marcus, what did I tell you? What did I tell you? What did I tell you? James's voice was shaking. Mrs. Patterson went to Mr. Whitmore. She said I can't control my own child. She said you're a liability. Do you know what that means? It means I could lose this job that keeps a roof over our heads and food on our table. Do you understand? This isn't a game, Marcus. This is our life. I'm sorry, Dad, Marcus whispered. Tears pricked his eyes. She's hungry. She doesn't eat the food they give her. She's lonely. That is not your problem, James said, his voice rising and then catching. That is not your responsibility. You are 12 years old. Then he saw Marcus's face, the tears, the genuine remorse, and his anger melted into exhaustion. He knelt down and put his hands on Marcus's shoulders. Son, I know your heart is good. It's the best thing about you. Your mother always said you had the kindest heart she'd ever seen. But this world, it's not kind to people with good hearts. People like us, we can't afford trouble. We have to be invisible. We have to follow the rules. Do you understand? Rules are all that protect us. Marcus nodded, tears running down his cheeks. "No more sandwiches, promise me. No more visits, I promise," Marcus whispered. The next day, 2:30 came and went. Marcus stayed in his closet. He tried to do his social studies homework, but the words swam before his eyes. He felt a heavy cold feeling in his stomach, guilt, worry. He pictured Mrs. Dorothy staring at the door, waiting. He lasted 2 days. On the 3rd day, he couldn't take it anymore. The guilt was like a weight pressing on his chest. He had his sandwich, he'd made it himself that morning, sneaking down to the kitchen before his father woke up, adding extra mayo because Dorothy had said the last one was too dry. He crept out of the closet. He checked the hallway carefully. It was clear. He ran to room 318. He slipped inside. Dorothy was in her wheelchair, staring at the door, like she'd been waiting. When she saw him, her whole face seemed to light up for just a second before the familiar scowl returned. "You're late," she barked, but there was no real anger in it. 3 days late. "I'm sorry," he said, crossing the room quickly, handing her the sandwich. "My dad, I got in trouble, big trouble. I'm not supposed to come here anymore. I promised I wouldn't, but I couldn't." "Yeah, well," she said, trying to unwrap the wax paper. "Trouble is part of life. You learn that when you get to be my age." She tried to unwrap the wax paper, but her hands were shaking more than usual. They were worse than Marcus had ever seen them. She tried to lift the sandwich, but her fingers fumbled. It dropped onto her lap. She cursed a low, angry sound that was almost a sob. She tried to pick it up again, but her swollen knuckles wouldn't work. They were red and gay-flamed. Today, she looked defeated, and for the first time since Marcus had met her, she looked old. Not fierce, not angry, just old and sick and tired. Without thinking, Marcus stepped forward. He picked up the sandwich. "Here," he said gently. He held it up to her mouth. She stared at him. Her fierce brown eyes seemed to water. She looked away, embarrassed, her jaw clenching. But she leaned forward and took a small bite. They stayed like that for several minutes. This 12-year-old boy, and the 86-year-old woman. He patiently held her sandwich for her, and she took small bites, chewing slowly, not speaking. When she was done, she cleared her throat roughly. She reached to her bedside table with her shaking hand. She fumbled in the drawer, and pulled something out. She pressed it into his hand. It was heavy and solid. It was a coin. Not like a quarter or any modern coin he'd seen. It was bigger, heavier, made of brass or bronze. It had an ornate design on it, an anchor and some kind of emblem he didn't recognize. "Found this," she grumbled, not meeting his eyes. "Don't need it, too old for trinkets. Go on, take it. A trade for the sandwiches. Fair's fair." Marcus looked at it. It was beautiful, the metal worn smooth in some places from handling. "Thank you, Mrs. Dorothy. This is don't thank me. It's just a piece of junk, probably not worth anything. Just take it before I change my mind." She turned to the window. Marcus slipped the coin into his pocket, feeling its weight, and left quietly. That was yesterday, and today Marcus sat on the soft leather seat of a car that was nicer than any car he'd ever been in. The seats were cream-colored leather, butter-soft. His legs were too short to touch the floor. His father sat beside him, stiff as a board, barely breathing. James was nervously picking at a loose thread on his uniform. He had tried to go home and change, but Senator Harrison had been polite but firm. "There isn't time, Mr. Carter. We can arrange for your things later. This cannot wait." Senator Harrison sat in the seat opposite them, her posture perfect. She had not spoken since they got in the car, instead looking at a tablet in her hands. The other 4 aides were in 2 other black sedans, one in front of them and one behind. "Where are we going?" James finally asked, his voice trembling. "If this is about a bill, I promise, Mrs. Castellano never wanted for anything." "Mr. Carter," the senator said, looking up from her tablet, "this is not about a bill. This is not about her care. Please try to relax. I know this is overwhelming." She looked at Marcus, and her expression softened slightly. Dorothy, Mrs. Castellano, was a very specific woman. Precise, meticulous. She made very specific, and some might say unusual, final arrangements. She looked at Marcus with something like curiosity mixed with respect. "She told me about you, you know. She called me 2 weeks ago. We had a long conversation." Marcus looked up surprised. "She did.
She did. A very small smile touched the senator's lips. She called you the supply officer, said you ran a covert operation to keep her fed.
Marcus felt his cheeks warm. She called me the sandwich ghost too. Yes, that too. She said you were the only person in that entire facility who wasn't afraid of her, who saw past the anger to what was underneath. She was just lonely, Marcus said simply. And her hands hurt. She had arthritis, I think. She tried to hide it, but I could tell. Senator Harrison's eyes widened just for a second. She looked at James with newfound appreciation. Sir, your son is very observant, very perceptive. You should be proud. I am, James said quietly, putting a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Every day. The car slowed. They were in a part of the city Marcus had never seen. The buildings were tall and made of glass and steel, gleaming in the afternoon sun. The car pulled into a private garage beneath one of the tallest buildings. The senator led them to a private elevator. The doors were polished brass. The elevator went up fast and silent, Marcus's ears popping. Numbers flashed on a small screen, 10, 20, 30, 40. They didn't stop until 52. The doors opened into an office, but it wasn't an office. It was a room so large it looked like a museum lobby. It was all dark wood paneling, thick burgundy carpets, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. A massive window looked out over the entire city. Please sit, the senator said, gesturing to two chairs that looked like antiques. James and Marcus sat gingerly, afraid to put their full weight on the chairs. They looked tiny in the enormous room. Senator Harrison, James said, his voice small in the vast space, please, I'm a simple person. I clean floors. This is a lot. What is this all about? The senator stood by her massive mahogany desk. James, may I call you James? Of course, ma'am. Please call me Catherine. I was Dorothy's attorney, yes. I've been her attorney for 30 years, but I was also her friend. I was her last link to her old life. She paused. Dorothy Castellano was not a poor woman. She was not just some forgotten retiree living out her days in a budget nursing home. She was in fact one of the wealthiest women in this state. She built an empire in real estate development after she came home from the Navy in the 1970s. By the time she retired 20 years ago, her portfolio was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. James's jaw dropped, his face went pale. But she was in Meadowbrook, in a regular room. She wore the standard issue robe. She complained about the food. She had no visitors. She hated her family, the senator said. And the words were blunt and cold. She had a daughter, Margaret, who gave her 3 grandchildren. They are disappointments, all of them. They saw her as a walking checkbook. They wanted her money, but they didn't want her. They hadn't visited her in 7 years. 7 years. The senator's voice carried a sharp edge of anger now. So 3 years ago, Dorothy did something drastic. She liquidated most of her assets. She put everything into a private trust. She gave her family exactly what her daughter's prenuptial agreement required. A large sum, but a fraction of the total, maybe 5%. And then she vanished. She checked herself into Meadowbrook under her own name, but with no financial history attached. No insurance beyond basic Medicare. She wanted to see what the world was like with no money. She wanted to die as she was born, just a woman. Just Dorothy. She was, the senator said, her voice thick with emotion, testing the world, testing humanity. She was looking for one person, just one, who would be kind to her with no expectation of reward. She looked at Marcus, and then you little supply officer, you brought her a sandwich, you saw her, you cared, you risked getting in trouble, risked your father's job, just to make sure a mean old woman had something to eat. Marcus felt tears prick his own eyes. The senator opened a thick leather folder on her desk. Dorothy was a sailor. She didn't believe in long flowery wills. She wrote what she called standing orders, like the kind given on a ship. They are simple, direct, and they are ironclad. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. She left her family nothing more than what the prenuptial agreement required. She left me this desk and a request to keep an eye on things. And then she looked at James. There is the final provision. And I quote, to James Carter, who is raising a son with a good heart, who works with dignity and asks for nothing, who makes himself invisible but deserves to be seen. I leave the sum of $750,000 to ensure he never has to be invisible again. James Carter made a sound, a small gasp. He put his hand to his mouth, his eyes filled with tears. Ma'am, I can't, I didn't, I was just doing my job. I just cleaned floors. It is yours, James. She was very clear. She wanted you to have security, to have choices. And to Marcus Carter the senator continued, the supply officer, the only one brave enough to face Dorothy the destroyer and see past the thorns to the person underneath. She left you, well, she left you her junk, as she called it. She opened a desk drawer and pulled out a large, heavy, dark green metal trunk, a footlocker. It was old and battered. She also left you the contents of the trust. The full trust, a sum of approximately $42 million, to be managed by myself and Mr. Carter until you are of age. But Marcus wasn't listening to the part about the money. He was looking at the trunk. The senator placed it on the floor with a heavy thud. This, she said, kneeling beside it, was the real inheritance, the thing she cared about most. Marcus slid off the chair. He knelt on the thick carpet, on the side of the trunk. In faded white paint, stenciled in military block letters, was a name. He touched the letters, tracing them with his finger. L.T.S. Carter. But, that's my name. Marcus said, that's my last name. Not your last name, Marcus. James whispered, his voice choked with tears. That was your grandmother's. That was Lieutenant Sarah Carter's footlocker. Senator Harrison looked at Marcus, and there was such kindness in her eyes. Dorothy knew your grandmother. They served on the same ship, the USS Maddox, a destroyer operating in the Pacific during the Vietnam War era. They were in the same unit, served together for 2 years. Sarah, she saved Dorothy's life. There was a fire in the engine room during a training exercise. Everyone was evacuating, following protocol. But Dorothy had fallen, broken her ankle. She couldn't walk. The senator's voice caught. Sarah went back in. Everyone else was running out, but Sarah went back in. Through the smoke and flames, found Dorothy, threw her over her shoulder, carried her out, saved her life and 3 other sailors who were trapped. Nearly died doing it. They gave her the Navy Cross for it. Dorothy tried to find her family for years afterward, tried to repay the debt, but Sarah was an orphan, raised in foster care. She never knew she had children, had family. She died young, complications from those same burns, believing she was alone in the world. But she wasn't. The senator said to Marcus, kneeling down to his level. She had a son, James. And she had a grandson, you. The moment Dorothy saw you, she said she knew. You have her eyes, the exact same eyes. And when you told her your last name was Carter, she knew. She knew she'd found Sarah's family. Marcus looked at the trunk. He looked at his father, who was crying quiet tears. He looked at the senator, who was smiling through her own tears. She wasn't just testing the world. Marcus said, finally understanding. She was waiting. She was waiting for my dad to get a job there. She was waiting for me, for us, for Sarah's family. She said to tell you one thing, the senator said. She pulled a small folded napkin from her jacket pocket. Marcus took it with trembling fingers. He unfolded it carefully. On it, in a shaky handwriting, was one word. Thank you. Below it, in smaller letters, you saw me. James Carter's hand was pressed so tightly against his face that his knuckles were white. His whole body was trembling. The number the senator had said, $750,000, was not processing. It was not a number for him. James Carter, a man who measured his life in cleaning supplies and bus transfers. I don't understand, James whispered. Ma'am, Catherine, that's a mistake. I can't accept that. I didn't do anything. You did, Senator Harrison said, and her voice was firm but kind. You did your job with dignity. You raised a son who has a good heart. Dorothy valued that more than anything. She saw you, James. She knew you were invisible to everyone else, just the janitor, just the help, and it made her angry. Made her furious that good people had to hide, had to shrink themselves, had to apologize for existing just to survive. Marcus wasn't looking at his father. His eyes were fixed on the dark green metal trunk. L.T.S. Carter. My grandmother, he said. She knew her. They were friends. They were more than friends, the senator said. She crouched down. She tapped the heavy latch on the footlocker. May I open it? Marcus nodded. The senator worked the latch. It was stiff from decades of disuse, but it finally sprang open with a loud clack. A smell wafted out. It was the smell of old canvas, old metal, and something faint and dry, like old paper and pressed flowers and memories. James moved closer, drawn by curiosity despite his shock. Inside, things were packed with military neatness. On top was a thick wool blanket. It was navy blue, the color faded. Marcus touched it. It was rough, not soft. The kind of blanket made for function, not comfort. Beneath it, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was a small dark blue velvet box. Senator Harrison lifted it out carefully, reverently. Dorothy told me about this. She kept it safe for 40 years, waiting for this moment. She opened it. Inside, resting on a bed of faded white satin, was a medal. It was a star hanging from a blue ribbon, with thin white stripes. The Navy Cross, the senator said. The second highest military decoration that can be awarded to a member of the United States Navy. It was Sarah's. She was awarded it posthumously, for extraordinary heroism, for the action that saved Dorothy's life, and the lives of 3 other sailors. Dorothy kept it for her. She said she was just holding it in trust, keeping it safe until she could find Sarah's family and return it to them. She handed the box to Marcus with both hands. It was heavy, much heavier than Marcus expected. My grandmother was a hero, Marcus whispered. The very definition of one, Senator Harrison agreed. James was crying harder now, but this time the tears were not for himself. They were tears for a woman he had never really known, a woman who had died when he was only 3 years old. His mother. Beneath where the medal had been, there were other items. The first was a small leather-bound book. It was worn at the edges, its cover soft with age. The second was a small heavy brass-colored coin, exactly like the one Dorothy had given him. Marcus picked it up carefully. It had an anchor on one side, and an emblem on the other, a ship, surrounded by words, USS Maddox and Engineering Division. Mrs. Dorothy gave me one just like this, Marcus said, his hand flying to his pocket. He pulled out the coin she had given him. He held them side by side. They were identical. She said it was junk. That, the senator said, is a Navy Challenge coin. It's not junk. It's incredibly important. Sailors carry them. They're a symbol of membership, of belonging. You show that coin in a room of old sailors, and you are instantly recognized as one of them. Family. Dorothy gave you hers. She pointed to the one in the trunk. That one was Sarah's. Now you have both. You carry both their legacies. Marcus held one in each hand, feeling their weight. Finally he picked up the leather-bound book. A journal. He opened the cover carefully. The first page was written in beautiful old-fashioned cursive. July 12, 1968. Still raining. We've been in port for 3 days now, and the rain hasn't stopped. I hope we move out soon. I'm getting restless. I have a feeling this deployment is going to change everything. Dorothy got another letter from home today. Her wife sent photos of their new house. She's trying to act tough about it, pretending she doesn't care, but I saw her looking at those photos for an hour. She misses home more than she lets on. Marcus closed it quickly, carefully. It felt too private. This is, James started, then stopped, unable to find words. This is all just so much. It's overwhelming. It is, the senator said gently. And Dorothy knew it would be, which is why she appointed me to help you, to guide you through this, to protect you. Protect us? James asked, looking up, a new fear entering his eyes. From what? The question was answered by a sharp, angry buzz from the intercom on the senator's desk. Senator Harrison stood up, her body tensing. Her face hardened. She pressed the button. Yes, Linda. Senator Harrison, I am so sorry. Her secretary's voice crackled through the speaker. Mrs. Castellano's daughter is here. Margaret Porter, and her grandchildren, David and Victoria. And their attorney, Mr. Lawson. They're not listening. They're demanding to see you immediately. They're coming in right now. It's all right, Linda, the senator said, her voice dropping an octave. Let them come. I've been expecting this. She let go of the button and looked at James. From them. The grand wooden doors of the office burst open with a force that made them bang against the wall. A woman in her late 60s with a soft pink face and a very expensive-looking but poorly tailored suit strode in like she owned the place. She looked like Dorothy in some ways, the same bone structure, the same height, but all the hard edges had been sanded off, leaving just entitlement and indignation. This was Margaret Castellano Porter, the daughter. Behind her were two younger people, a man in his 30s with slicked back hair and an expensive watch. A woman in her late 20s wearing a black dress that looked like it cost more than James's car, her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to hurt. These were the grandchildren, David and Victoria. And behind them was a man who looked like a vulture in expensive clothes. He wore a pinstripe suit and carried a leather briefcase. This was Mr. Lawson, the attorney, Senator Harrison. Margaret puffed, her face red. What is the meaning of this? We were at the club. We had to hear from a service that my mother had passed. You didn't even call us. Victoria's cold eyes swept the room. She saw James in his gray janitor's uniform, and Marcus, a small boy on the floor next to an open footlocker. Her eyes narrowed. Senator, Victoria said, her voice like ice. Why is the help here? She said help, like it was a dirty word. And why are they touching my grandmother's belongings? That footlocker belongs to the family. James stood up automatically, his body responding to years of conditioning. He automatically tried to move behind the senator, to become invisible. The senator did not move. If anything, she seemed to grow larger. Mrs. Porter, Mr. Porter, Mr. Lawson, she said, nodding to each in turn. Your mother and grandmother's passing was this morning at approximately 6:47 a.m. My first duty as her attorney and executor was to execute her final directives as she specified them, which I am doing. Her directive, Victoria snapped. Her directive was to call her family, her only family, her blood. On the contrary, the senator said, her voice flat, her explicit directive, and I have it in writing, notarized and witnessed, was to ensure you were not the first to be called. She did not want you at the facility. She wanted, and I quote, to die in peace without vultures circling. Margaret looked like she'd been slapped. She was senile, David said, stepping forward. She must have been. I'm her grandson, her blood. This is clearly some kind of mistake. That is a matter of opinion, the senator said coolly. It's a matter of fact, Lawson spoke up. He stepped forward, placing his briefcase on a nearby chair. Senator Harrison, we have just been informed of the will's primary provisions. This is a farce. A woman in a budget nursing home disinheriting her own blood. It screams mental incompetence. It reeks of undue influence. He stared with open contempt at James. We are here to inform you that we are contesting this will. We will be filing motions tomorrow morning to freeze all assets pending a full mental evaluation of the deceased, and we will be deposing everyone involved. The threat was clear. It was aimed directly at James. I didn't. James began, his voice barely audible. My son, he was just being kind. I didn't know. I thought she was just another resident. Your son, Victoria said, stepping forward. Yes, let's talk about him. How very convenient. My grandmother, a multimillionaire, suddenly befriends a janitor's child. How touching. How perfectly calculated. She turned to Lawson. How much did they pay him to cry at her bedside? How many sandwiches did they force-feed that old woman to gain her trust? I didn't. Marcus cried out, scrambling to his feet. She was my friend. She was lonely. She hated the meatloaf. Nobody visited her. Not you. Not any of you. Be quiet, child. Margaret snapped. This is grown-up business. This doesn't concern you. You be quiet, Marcus shouted. Even the senator looked at him with new respect. Marcus was not a lawyer. He was not rich. He was not experienced in the ways of the world, but he was 12, and his moral compass was simple and absolute. These people were bad. They were the bullies. You're the disappointments, he said, his voice ringing in the silent office. That's what she called you. The disappointments. Margaret's mouth fell open. Victoria's face turned from cold to white-hot rage. She said so, Marcus went on, pointing at them.
She said you only wanted her money. She said you never visited. She said she tested the world, and you failed. You all failed. She was right. You didn't care about her. You didn't even know her hands hurt. You didn't know she couldn't sleep. You didn't know she liked baseball, or hated beige, or that her wife died 20 years ago and she still missed her every single day. He was crying now, but his voice didn't waver. I was there. I saw her. Every day. She was all alone. She was sad and her hands hurt and nobody cared. But you didn't know that. You weren't there. You never came. Not once in 3 years. Victoria looked at Marcus, her face twisted with rage, then at the footlocker. She saw the journal. She saw the medal, and a new look of calculation entered her eyes. So, she said to Lawson, this is their play. They've invented some long-lost Navy buddy connection. How touching. How convenient that this mysterious friend from my grandmother's past just happens to be related to the janitor's son. She laughed. This is pathetic. A dead woman's fantasy about the Navy. Lieutenant Sarah Carter was not a fantasy, the senator said, and her voice was suddenly a low growl. She stepped forward. She was a hero, a decorated war veteran, a woman who saved your grandmother's life at great personal cost. A woman your family will never be fit to stand beside. We'll see about that, Lawson sneered. A court will find this all very suspicious. A 12-year-old boy inherits a multi-million-dollar trust, based on some story about sandwiches and Navy buddies. I think not. He pulled a folder from his briefcase. We'll have this child on a witness stand. We'll have his father's entire life examined, every dollar he's ever earned. Every bill he's ever been late on. By the time we're done they'll wish they'd never heard the name Dorothy Castellano. James was pale. He looked like he was going to be sick. This was his worst nightmare. This was the trouble he had spent his entire life trying to avoid. Senator, he whispered, please give them the money, all of it. I don't want it. I just want to take my son and go home. No, Marcus said. He walked over and took his father's hand. No, Dad, Mrs. Dorothy wanted us to have it. She was trading us. She gave us this because we were kind to her. It's not wrong, it's right. Victoria let out a laugh. $1 billion for sandwiches. We'll have him declared incompetent to testify. This is a slam dunk, Lawson. That, Senator Harrison roared, will be enough. The Porters and their lawyer fell silent. Mr. Lawson, you will file your motions, and I will file my responses, but you will not threaten my clients. You will not intimidate a child in my office. She pointed to James and Marcus. These two people are the primary beneficiaries of Dorothy Castellano's estate. As such, they are my sole focus. Dorothy, my client, my friend, was aware you would do this. She predicted it with perfect accuracy. She was not a foolish woman. She was not senile or confused. She was one of the most brilliant people I've ever known, and she prepared a defense, a comprehensive ironclad defense. She looked at Marcus. Marcus, look at the journal again, inside the cover. The other notebook. Marcus looked confused. There's just he opened the leather journal carefully. Tucked inside the front cover was another book, a simple spiral-bound notebook. He pulled it out. That, the senator said, is Dorothy's journal. Not from 1968, from the last 3 years, the one she was writing at Meadowbrook. She wrote in it every single day, what she ate, which nurse was on duty, what she watched, what medications she took, her physical condition, her mental state. She walked to her desk, and most importantly, who visited her. She opened the notebook to a marked page. She had it notarized every single week by a private notary I sent in. Every week for 3 years. A legal document, a 3-year-long record of her sound mind, her clear intentions, and her observations, and of your absolute total complete abandonment. That journal, Lawson said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence, could have been written by anyone.
It was witnessed, the senator said, cutting him off. Every page. By the notary, by me, by 3 different handwriting experts, by doctors who examined her mental state quarterly. We have medical records, cognitive assessments, psychiatric evaluations, all showing a woman of sound mind making clear, rational decisions. She pulled more documents from her folder. We also have video depositions. Hours of them. Dorothy giving testimony about her mental state, her intentions, her reasons. Explaining in her own words why she made the choices she made. Victoria's face went pale. That is the arsenal, as Dorothy called it. That is what we will present in court. And Mr. Lawson, I guarantee you, when a jury sees video of Dorothy Castellano, lucid, articulate, explaining exactly why she chose to leave her money to people who showed her kindness rather than family who abandoned her, they will not be sympathetic to your cause. She closed the folder with a sharp snap. Now, she said, this meeting is over. Security will show you out. You have 24 hours to withdraw your contest. If you do not, we will proceed to court, and I promise you we will not only win but we will seek sanctions against you and your attorney for frivolous litigation. Victoria opened her mouth to speak, but Lawson put a hand on her arm. We'll see you in court, Senator, he said. But there was uncertainty in his voice now. They turned to leave, Margaret practically running, David and Victoria following. At the door, Victoria turned back. This isn't over, she hissed. No, Senator Harrison agreed. It's not, but it will be, and you will lose. Just as you lost your grandmother's love through your own selfishness. Good day. The door closed with a final click. The drive from the senator's office was silent. James and Marcus sat in the back of the black town car. James was still shaking. Marcus was holding the footlocker on his lap. I'm sorry, Dad, Marcus said after a long silence. Sorry for what, son? For getting us in trouble. For starting all this. James looked at his son. Really looked at him, saw the Navy Cross in its blue velvet box, saw the challenge coins, 2 of them, one from each woman who'd served together, saw the journals that contained history and love and memory, and he felt something shift inside him. A weight lifting, a fear dissipating. It was a strength he didn't know he had. It was the strength Lieutenant Sarah Carter must have had, the strength Dorothy had, the strength to stand up, to be seen, to claim space in the world. Don't you be sorry, James said, and his voice was stronger now. He took his son's hand. You did nothing wrong, you were kind. You saw someone who needed help and you helped them. And those people back there are angry because they don't know how to be kind. But Mrs. Dorothy did pay us, Marcus said. She gave us the money. And no, James said. She didn't pay us for being kind. She gave us a gift because we were kind. There's a difference. Payment is transactional. A gift is, it's something else. It's gratitude. It's love in a way. The car was not going to their apartment. James had noticed but hadn't said anything. Senator, where are we going? He asked. One last thing, the senator said from the front seat. Dorothy's final provision. She knew they would try to find you. Knew your apartment wouldn't be safe. She wanted you to be secure, protected. The car turned onto a quiet tree-lined street. The houses were not mansions. They were simple brick and wood single-family homes, the kind with small neat lawns and flower beds. The car pulled into the driveway of a small clean brick house. It had a bright red door and a small front porch with a swing. This, the senator said, is your new home. It's paid for, fully paid. The utilities are on, the pantry is stocked. Dorothy owned this property for 25 years. She bought it as a quiet place. She left it to you. She wanted you to be safe while the legal proceedings happen. She wanted you to have a home, not just an apartment, a place that's yours. James stared at the house through the car window. It was the first home he had ever owned, the first place that would be his. He began to cry again, but this time they were different tears. They were tears of release, of a dam breaking, a dam of fear that had held for years, of rent payments and late notices, and the constant terror of homelessness, of trying to be invisible, of apologizing for existing. It all washed away. That night, Marcus sat on the floor of his new room. It was bigger than his old room. It had carpet, soft cream-colored carpet, and walls painted a pale blue. He put the footlocker at the end of his new bed. He opened the spiral notebook, Dorothy's journal from Meadowbrook. He read the first entry, August 3rd. The new place is as bad as I'd hoped. The meatloaf is a crime against humanity. The walls are beige. I hate beige. It's the color of giving up. No one has visited. Not Margaret. Not the grandchildren. Good. I don't want them here. I want to be left alone. I want to find out who I am without the money, without the name. He turned the page. August 4th. Still no one. Margaret has not called. David has not called. Victoria has not called. They don't know I'm here. They just know the money is gone. That's all it took to make them disappear. 2 days, they showed their true colors faster than I expected. Good, now I know. He skipped ahead, pages and pages of the same observations. Complaints about food, notes about nurses, but always no visitors, no family, no one. Then he found a new entry. 3 months ago, October 15th, a ghost came today. A small boy with dark hair and watchful eyes. He was peeking through my door. He looked scared but curious. I told him to scram. He scrammed. Good instincts. The next day, October 16th, the ghost came back. He didn't come in this time, but he left something on my table. A sandwich. Half a turkey sandwich, wrapped in wax paper. I didn't eat it at first. Thought it might be poisoned, but I was hungry. The food here is garbage. I ate it. It was dry but real. Someone's homemade lunch. Why would a child give me his lunch? Marcus smiled, tears running down his face. He kept reading. October 17th. The ghost came again. This time, I was awake. I asked him why. He said I looked hungry. He said I didn't eat the food they bring. He's observant. I like that. Reminds me of Sarah. She noticed everything too. October 20th. His name is Marcus. Marcus Carter. When he told me his name, I almost had a heart attack. Could it be, after all these years, could Sarah have had family? I need to investigate. October 25th. I called Catherine, had her look into it. Marcus Carter, son of James Carter, grandson of Lieutenant Sarah Carter, USN. It's her. It's Sarah's family. They're here. Sarah's grandson has been bringing me sandwiches. The universe has a sense of humor. Or maybe it's Sarah, watching from wherever she is, making sure her family found me. October 30th. I've made my decision, changed my will today. Catherine thinks I'm crazy, but she'll do it. I'm leaving everything to them. To Sarah's family, to the people who showed kindness without knowing who I was. This is how it should be. This is how Sarah would want it. Marcus closed the notebook carefully. He had his friend's voice back. He could hear Dorothy in every word, the anger, the loneliness, the sharp humor, the hidden kindness. And he knew holding that book, sitting in this room that was now his, that they were going to be okay. 8 months later, the new wing of the Meadowbrook Senior Living Facility was dedicated. It was not called the Castellano Wing. Dorothy had been specific about that. It was called the Carter Castellano Friendship Wing. The walls were no longer beige. They were a warm bright yellow. The meatloaf was gone, replaced by a real chef. The nurses, including Mrs. Patterson, had new equipment and a scholarship fund for their children. There was a new library, a meditation garden, and a music room. James Carter stood at the podium in the lobby. He wore a simple blue suit, his first suit. He was on the board of directors now. He was nervous, but he did not tremble the way he used to. "My name is James Carter," he said. "I used to work here. My job was to clean these floors. My job was to be invisible, to not be seen or heard." He looked at the crowd. He saw Eugene smiling. He saw Senator Harrison. He saw nurses and doctors and residents. "A woman I knew," he continued. "A woman named Dorothy. She saw me. She saw my son. She saw past our circumstances to who we were as people. She taught us that kindness is not a weakness, that being seen is not a danger, that we all deserve to take up space in this world. This wing is not about money. It's not about inheritance or wills. It's about something simpler. It's about a trade, a sandwich for a friendship, a small act of kindness that changed everything. Today we open this wing to honor her. To honor my mother, Lieutenant Sarah Carter, who saved Dorothy's life 40 years ago. And to honor every resident here, to let you know," his voice caught. "We see you, you matter, you are not invisible." The crowd applauded. Later Marcus sat in what used to be room 318. It was not a patient room anymore. It had been converted into a library and reading room. The green footlocker, Lieutenant Sarah Carter's, was in the corner, in a glass display case. Beside it was Dorothy's powder blue cardigan and the spiral-bound journal. Marcus was reading from his grandmother's leather-bound journal to a small group of residents who gathered there every Thursday afternoon. Eugene sat in the back. "Listen to this one," Marcus said. "August 22, 1968. My feet are soaked from the storm, but Castellano, Dorothy, she found a dry pair of socks for me somehow.
She just showed up at my bunk with them, tossed them at me without a word. When I tried to thank her, she said, "Don't get emotional. We look out for each other. That's how this works." She's gruff and she swears like a sailor. Well, she is a sailor, but she's a good soul. The best kind of friend. Eugene smiled, wiping his eyes. She sounds like a crank. She was. Marcus smiled back, looking at the photograph on the wall, a picture of Dorothy and Sarah together on the deck of the USS Maddox, both in uniform, both young and strong and smiling. But she was our crank. He looked at the wall where a new brass plaque had been mounted. It just said, "In memory of Dorothy Castellano and Lt. Sarah Carter, USN friends across time. We look out for each other. That's how this works." Below it in smaller letters, "This wing was made possible by their legacy of kindness." That evening Marcus and James sat in their living room in the brick house with the red door. The house that was theirs, really theirs. James was reading a book. He'd started reading again. Marcus was doing homework. "Dad," Marcus said, looking up. "Yeah, son, do you think Mrs. Dorothy knows that we did what she wanted, that we're taking care of people the way she wanted?" James set down his book. He thought about it carefully. "I think she does. I think maybe she and your grandmother are somewhere watching, having a laugh about how it all worked out. What do you think they're saying?" James smiled. "Probably something like, 'Took them long enough to figure it out.'" Marcus laughed. Then his expression grew serious. "I miss her. Is that weird? I only knew her for 3 months. "It's not weird at all," James said, pulling his son close. "She was your friend. Friends matter, no matter how long you know them." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together in their home. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. The neighborhood was quiet, kids playing in yards, neighbors chatting on porches, a life that was theirs, a life they'd earned through nothing more complicated than kindness. And that's where we'll end the story of Marcus, his father James, and Dorothy the Destroyer. I hope it gave you a chance to step out of the everyday and just drift for a bit. A reminder that the smallest acts of kindness, a sandwich, a moment of attention, seeing someone when everyone else looks away, can change everything. What were you doing while listening? Maybe taking a break from work, or settling in for a quiet evening. Drop a comment and let me know. What was your favorite part? The moment Marcus met Dorothy, the reveal of the Navy connection, the confrontation. And if you want to make sure we cross paths again, hitting that like button and subscribing makes a huge difference. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and remember, you never know when a small act of kindness might change someone's entire world. We'll see you next time.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.